Jake was alone in the woods, far from the noise of the city. He liked to camp there on weekends. Just him, the stars, and the fire. It was peaceful, quiet, and simple. But that night something strange happened. He was watching the sky when a bright light flashed across the stars. It wasn't a shooting star. It was too fast, too low. In glowing red, the light grew bigger, louder, and then boom. The ground shook as something crashed deep in the forest. Not far from him, Jake grabbed his flashlight and ran. Smoke was rising behind the trees. He pushed through the bushes, his heart beating faster with each step. As he reached the clearing, he stopped and stared in shock. In front of him was a small silver ship. It was broken, steam coming out from the sides. It looked like nothing from Earth. It had strange blue lights, and the metal was smooth and shiny like glass. One of the side panels was open. Like a door, Jake stepped closer. Carefully, he heard a sound. A soft cry, like a child in pain. He pointed his flashlight inside. What he saw made him freeze. A girl, maybe 10 or 11 years old, sat on the floor of the ship. She looked almost human, 2 eyes, 2 arms, long black hair, but her skin had a light purple glow. Her clothes were silver and glowing slightly. Tears were running down her cheeks as she looked up at him with big, scared eyes. Are you okay?" Jake asked, unsure if she could understand him. The girl blinked and slowly nodded. Then, in a soft, shaky voice, she said something that made his heart stop. "Please, make my mom smile again. Be her husband." Jake stood there, not knowing what to say. "Wait, what?" he asked, confused. The girl tried to stand but fell back down, weak. He rushed forward and caught her before she hit the floor. She was cold and her body was shaking. I don't understand," he said gently. "Are you hurt? Where are you from?" But the girl only whispered, "Please, don't let her be sad anymore." Then she passed out in his arms. Jake lifted her up carefully and looked around. There was no one else, just the ship and the forest. He had to get her warm fast. He carried her back to his cabin and laid her on the couch. He wrapped her in a blanket and made some hot tea. She was still breathing, but her eyes were closed, her face pale. He looked at her, trying to make sense of what had just happened. An alien girl had crash-landed in front of him, crying and asking him to marry her mother. It sounded like something from a sci-fi movie, but it was real and it was happening now. Just then, something lit up in his backpack. He opened it and saw a small glowing cube he had taken from the ship without thinking. The cube floated into the air and projected a hologram in the middle of the room. A tall, elegant woman appeared. She looked strong and beautiful, with the same purple glow as the girl. Her hair flowed like black fire and her eyes were deep gold. She was speaking in another language, fast and full of emotion. Jake couldn't understand a word, but one word repeated again and again, clear and loud: promise, promise. Then the hologram disappeared, and the room was quiet again. Jake sat down, completely lost. Who was this woman? Why did the girl want him to make her mom smile again? And what kind of promise was this? He looked at the sleeping girl, still wrapped in the blanket. She looked peaceful now, but he could still see the tears on her cheeks. Jake didn't know what he had just walked into. But one thing was clear: this wasn't just an accident. This was something bigger, something not from this world. As the wind blew outside and the trees whispered in the dark, Jake felt a chill down his spine. Something was coming, and he was now a part of it. He didn't know what the next day would bring, but he had a feeling his life was about to change forever. The room was silent, but Jake could not sleep. The alien girl was still lying on his couch, wrapped in blankets. Outside, the forest was quiet, too quiet. Even the owls and crickets had gone silent, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Jake sat near the fire, watching the glowing cube in his hand. It had stopped floating, but a soft blue light still pulsed inside it. Like a heartbeat, he stared at it, wondering what it was, what it meant, and why it called him promise. His mind was full of questions, but no answers. Suddenly the girl stirred, her eyes slowly opening. She sat up quickly, looking around in panic, but when she saw Jake, her face softened just a little. "You stayed," she whispered. Of course I did, Jake replied gently. Are you okay? The girl nodded slowly, her voice soft and strange. I am, Lura, daughter of Commander Yavara. From the world of Altora, Jake blinked, taking in every word that woman in the hologram. That's your mom? Lura nodded again, her eyes sad. She used to smile. Before my father disappeared, before Earth was marked as a threat, Jake leaned in, confused. Wait, marked as a threat? What do you mean? Lura looked at him carefully, then stood up and walked to the window. She pulled back the curtain and looked at the stars. My people study worlds. Some we protect, others we take. She turned back to him, her voice quiet but heavy. Earth was going to be taken. Destroyed. Until my mother saw something special here. Something human. Jake felt a strange chill as she said that. What did she see? You, Lura said simply. Or someone like you. She met a human man years ago. Her. He gave her hope. She looked down, voice trembling. But he vanished. And now, my mother is broken. She hides it from the council, but I see it. I feel it. Jake stood slowly, trying to understand. Why did you ask? Me too? Be her husband? Lura turned and looked straight at him, because she needs something real again. Something human. Not war, not orders, not duty. Just love. Jake laughed nervously. Not in a cruel way, but in disbelief. Look, I'm just a guy who camps in the woods on weekends. I fix motorcycles. Not alien hearts, but your heart is strong, Lura said, walking closer to him. I felt it when I crashed. The cube chose you, just like it chose him. Before Jake could respond, a loud beep came from his phone. He pulled it out and saw a government alert on the screen. Warning. Unknown object detected near Secta. 9 citizens must remain indoors. Do not approach. Jake looked out the window and saw something flashing in the sky. Far away, red and blue lights, moving slowly, scanning the forest. They're looking for you. He said, turning back to Lura. She stepped back in fear, her skin pulsing with faint light. They'll try to take me, she whispered. They'll try to use me. Jake quickly grabbed a blanket and covered her. Then we're not going to let them find you, he said. It's not until I know what's really going on. He took the cube again and held it in front of her. How does this work? Can it talk to your mom again? Lura nodded. It's a key. But also a map. It can open the way to Elthera, if you choose. Jake looked into her glowing eyes, so full of hope and fear. He had a choice. Stay safe and hand her over. Or take a step into the unknown, into something bigger than himself. I need answers, he said, about your mother. About my father. About why Earth is even part of this. Lura reached for his hand and placed it on the cube. It began to glow brighter, spinning faster, humming softly. A blue light rose from the floor, circling them both. Lura looked up and whispered, then, follow me and find the truth, before it's too late. In seconds, the light flashed, and the cabin was empty. Only silence remained. Asterisk. Jake felt like he was falling, but there was no wind, no ground, no sound. Only blue light, wrapping around him like waves in the ocean. He couldn't see Lura, couldn't hear his own breath. Then, as suddenly as it began, the light vanished. He stood on solid ground again, but it wasn't Earth anymore. The air smelled like rain and flowers he had never known above him. 2 suns glowed in a purple sky. Floating islands drifted in the distance, with waterfalls that poured into clouds and disappeared. Birds with glowing wings flew through the air like living lights. This was Elthera. Lura stood beside him, calm and proud. This is my home, she said. And now, it is watching you, Jake. Turned and saw a giant silver gate open. A path of shining glass stretched forward, and on both sides, tall Eltheran. Beings stood. They didn't speak, but they stared at him with unreadable faces. Some curious, others cold. He felt like a stranger. Like a puzzle they were trying to solve. They know you're human, Lura said softly. Some fear you. Some believe in you. But all are watching. Jake followed her, each step echoing under his boots. He passed strange statues, humans and Eltherans standing side by side, hands joined. But the human faces looked familiar, almost like family. Finally, they reached a large hall made of crystalline light. The center stood a throne, not of gold, but of living vines and glowing stones, and on it sat the woman from the hologram. Commander Yavara. She stood as Jake entered, tall and powerful, her silver armor flowing like liquid, her golden eyes locked onto his, full of emotion that she tried to hide. "You came," she said in perfect English. "He really sent you." Jake stepped forward, confused and cautious. "You're Lura's mother," he said. "But who is he?" She smiled faintly, a sad smile. "Your father," she whispered. "A man from Earth. The only human I ever trusted." Jake's chest tightened. "That's not possible." "My father disappeared when I was 6. He left one night and never came back." Yavara stepped closer, her voice soft but clear. "He didn't leave. He came here to stop a war and gave his life to protect both our worlds." Jake felt the room spinning. All those years of wondering, of pain, of silence from his family, and now this. "Why didn't he come back?" he asked, his voice shaking. He was never allowed. Yavora said, "He became something more than human. And the cost was separation." Laura looked up at her mother, her voice gentle. "He wanted you to come one day, to finish what he started." Jake turned away, trying to breathe. "This is too much. I didn't ask for any of this." "You didn't have to," Yavara said. "The cube chose you because your blood is already part of Elthora." "Thora." "Earth." He looked back at her, confused, angry, overwhelmed. "Then what do you want from me now?" Yavara raised her hand, and a large map appeared in the air, showing Earth, Elthora, and hundreds of other stars. "War is coming," she said. "Many in our council believe Earth is weak, a waste, easy to conquer, but if you, a human, can bond with an Eltheran, if you can stand before the council as a symbol of peace." Jake interrupted. "You want me to marry you, don't you?" Yavara nodded. "Not as a lover, not yet, but as a leader, as a message." He stepped back, shaken. "This is crazy. I'm just a mechanic, not a hero." Lura took his hand gently. "You're more than that," just like he was. Before Jake could speak, the doors to the hall burst open. A group of Eltheran guards rushed in, their armor black and red, their weapons glowing. Commander Yavara. One of them said, "There has been a breach at the archives. Someone has stolen the Earth War Protocol." Yavara's face turned hard. "Who?" The guard hesitated, then spoke. "Counselor Malrek." And he left a message. A small drone floated in and projected a video. Malrek's face appeared. Sharp, cold, smiling without warmth. "The boy is here. Just like you warned," he said, "but no alliance can save Earth now." The screen glitched, and his last words echoed in the hall. "Let the fire begin." Jake sat alone on a sky bridge made of glass, high above Elthora's capital. The suns were setting in the distance, painting the clouds gold and violet far below. Glowing rivers flowed through the floating city like veins of light. It should have been beautiful, peaceful, even magical. But all he felt was a storm inside. The war was closer now. Counselor Malrek had vanished with the Earth War Protocol, a document that allowed Elthora to invade Earth without warning. Jake's world was in danger, and somehow he was supposed to stop it. He heard footsteps behind him. Soft and steady, Commander Yavara approached, dressed not in armor, but in a dark silver robe, without her uniform. She looked less like a warrior, and more like a woman, carrying years of sorrow. She sat beside him without a word, watching the suns fall beyond the clouds. "You look like him," she said finally, her voice almost a whisper. "Your father used to sit right here, watching the sky, wondering if Earth missed him." Jake didn't answer. His hands clenched in silence. "I grew up thinking he abandoned me," he said. "Now, I find out he was saving galaxies while I cried myself to sleep." Yavara nodded. "Slowly, I tried to send messages, but they never made it. He wanted to come back. He begged the council. Why didn't they let him?" Jake asked, looking at her for the first time. "Because loving a human was seen as betrayal," she said. "And now they see you as his echo." Another threat to the order. Jake laughed bitterly. Then why bring me here? Not just forget Earth and move on. Yavora turned to him, her golden eyes steady. Because I can't. I won't. And Lura won't let me. She was created for peace, she said, a child of balance. Your sister in a way, but born of science. And hope. Jake's mind spun again, the truth bending everything he thought he knew. She's not fully real? He asked quietly. She's more real than most of us, Yavora replied, and she believes in you, even if you don't. They sat in silence for a moment longer, then she stood and offered her hand. I have a proposal. She said, a deal, if you choose it. Jake raised an eyebrow. Another one of your council's games? No, she said, my own. You stay here for 7 Eltheran days, she continued. Not as a prisoner, but as a guest, a symbol. My partner, you will attend the Peace Summit as my companion. Show them that love between our kinds is still possible, and if I say no, Jake asked, then Earth will face war, she said without anger, and I will be forced to lead it. The words hit like a punch. This was no romance, no fairy tale. It was a political move, a gamble for peace. On the board, Jake stood and looked out over the glowing city. 7 days, he said, and then I decide. Yavora nodded at the end of the 7th day. If your heart still says no, I'll return you home. And protect Earth as long as I can. Jake took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the choice press against his chest. It wasn't about marriage now, or even saving Elthera. It was about showing both worlds something bigger than war. Hope I'll stay, he said, but no fake smiles. And no royal costumes? Yavora smiled, truly smiled. For the first time, no crowns, she said. Just truth. Suddenly a shadow passed over the bridge. A sleek black aircraft hovered above them. Dropping a small object that blinked red, Yavara's smile vanished. Jake stepped back as the object hit the glass and exploded into a burst of red smoke. An image formed in the smoke, Counselor Melrek. Once again, he spoke only one sentence. The human may play king, but Earth will still burn. Then the smoke scattered into the wind. Yavora turned to Jake, her voice hard again. Your time starts now. And the world is watching. Asterisk. The first day passed in silence, the second in whispers. By the 3rd day, the streets of Elthera were speaking Jake's name out loud. Some called him the Peace Link. Others called him the Invader with a smile. He was everywhere. On their news crystals, in their council meetings, and most of all, in their minds. But not all minds were kind. Jake stood at the center of a floating garden, surrounded by silver trees and fire-colored leaves. He was practicing how to speak in front of the Eltheran Council, words of unity, of hope, of second chances. Lura sat nearby, drawing shapes in the air with her glowing fingers. She looked calm, but her voice was tight when she spoke. They're watching you, even now, she said. Some want you to succeed. Others want you to disappear. Jake nodded. Typical politics, no, Lura said, looking up. This is not just politics. This is survival. Just then, a guard ran into the garden. Armor scratched, breath short, he dropped to one knee before Lura and Jake. Princess Lura. Forgive me, he said, but the shield tower has fallen. Jake stood quickly. What's the shield tower? The barrier that protects the city from outside forces? The guard answered. It was destroyed from within. A low hum began to rise around them. Sirens. Ancient and deep red light washed over the sky, and the peaceful floating city tilted into panic. Yavora appeared moments later through a beam of blue light, her armor all ready. On her face, cold as stone, she looked at Jake, then at her daughter. Then at the guard. They have come, she said, and they wear the mark of fire. Jake didn't understand. Not at first, but Lura explained as they moved through. Glowing halls and stairways of living crystal, the Fireborn, she said. Eltherans who believe in war, who think humans are poison. They serve Malrek now. Jake followed them to the war room, where a large map showed red points blinking all over the city. This is an attack, he said, but they're not aliens. They're your own people. Yavara nodded. It's a war of love and hate, she said. One side believes peace with Earth is possible. The other sees love as weakness. Suddenly, an explosion shook the palace. Dust falling from the high glass ceiling, a voice came through the speakers, twisted and full of rage. Bring us the human, and we will spare the child. Jake froze. Child. Yavora looked at him with fire in her eyes. They have taken Lura's energy double, her core self, the source of her life force. They want to trade it for you. Jake stepped back, heart pounding. So I'm supposed to just surrender? Yavora looked away, her jaw tight. No. I want you to leave. Go back to Earth. This is not your war anymore, but Jake shook his head. This became my war the second your people decided my planet was next, he said. And Lura. She brought me here because she believed in something better. Yavara stared at him, her eyes softening for just a moment. You sound like him, she whispered. Your father said the same words. Right before he gave up everything, Jake turned to the map, eyes narrowing. Then I'll do what he did, a smarter. He pointed to a narrow valley outside the city, hidden by clouds and shield shadows, if they're holding her. There, I can get in, he said. They're expecting a leader, not a mechanic. Yavara hesitated, then placed her hand over his. If you die, everything we've built dies with you. Jake gave a half smile. Then I guess I better live. As he prepared to leave, a voice came through a hidden communicator in his vest. It was distorted but clear enough. Jake, help me. They're using me too. Breaker. It was Lura, and it was already too late for silence. Asterisk, he didn't take a ship. He didn't bring guards. He wore no armor, no badge, no crown, just an old Eltherin jacket, torn at the sleeves, and a fire in his eyes. Jake walked alone. Into the Stormshade Valley, the place where the rebels lived, and the peace died. Every step felt heavier, as if the ground itself didn't want him there. The sky above was dark with violet clouds, and the wind whispered things he couldn't understand. Somewhere deep in that shadowed canyon, Lura was being held, and time was running out. The rebels called themselves the Fireborn. But they were not monsters. They were believers, believers in power. In pride, in a future without humans, they saw Jake not as a man, but as a mistake that needed to be erased. But Jake had something they didn't. A memory, not just his own, but his father's. Yavara had given him a vision before he left. Stored in the cube, a piece of his father's last thoughts, and in that memory, his father had said one thing again and again. Sometimes saving a world means letting go of one. Jake didn't fully understand it yet, but he would soon. The entrance to the rebel hideout was hidden behind a cracked mountain wall. He found it by following the echo of Lura's voice, carried through the rocks like light in a tunnel. She was singing a soft hum, the same lullaby she sang on. Earth, when she crashed, it was fading fast, but still alive. 2 rebels caught him at the gate, their weapons glowing red. Stop there, human, one said. No one passes. Jake raised his hands, no fear in his voice. I'm not here to fight, he said. I'm here to trade. The rebels looked at each other, then lowered their weapons. Come inside then, one said, but leave your name behind. Jake stepped into the stone fortress, lit by fire crystals and shadows. He saw the leaders sitting in a circle, faces sharp, eyes cold, and in the middle of them, Lura. Trapped inside a glowing sphere of light, her face pale, her body weak, her eyes met his, and she whispered through the barrier, I told you not to come. Jake stepped forward. Let her go, he said. You don't need her. Counselor Malrek stood, tall and bitter, his cloak burning at the edges like smoke. Oh, but we do, he said. She is the key to the shield systems, the gate portals. Even the command core of Eltherus' throne. She was made from both worlds. A bridge, yes, but also a weapon. Jake clenched his fists. She's a child, he said, not a code. Malrek smiled coldly, and yet here you are, risking everything for her. Tell me, human, would you give up Earth to save her? Jake said nothing. Malrek stepped closer, his voice dropping low. Here's your choice, he said. You can leave with her right now. I'll even spare Elthara. But Earth, your home, will be gone by morning. Or he said you can stay here. Surrender your place in the Alliance. And Earth will be protected. Jake looked at Lyra. Her small hands pressed against the inside of the energy cage. Tears slid down her glowing cheeks. Don't choose me. She whispered, choose Earth. That's what he would have done. Jake dropped to one knee, his heart pulled in two directions. This was the moment his father spoke of. Not war, not glory, but pain, sacrifice, and truth. He stood slowly, looked Melrek in the eye, and said, I choose neither. Melrek frowned. What? Jake pulled the cube from his pocket and slammed it into the floor. A pulse of blue light exploded outward, shorting the cage, blasting the walls, knocking Malrek and the rebels to the ground. Lyra collapsed, free at last, and Jake caught her in his arms now, he whispered. Let's choose our own path. As alarms blared and the hideout shook, they ran through the tunnels, light trailing behind them. They didn't stop until they reached the edge of the valley, where a transport drone was waiting, sent by Yavara. Inside the drone, as the doors closed, Lyra looked up at him, barely awake. You made the choice. Jake held her hand tightly. No, he said, I broke the game. The day of judgment came without warning. No sunrise, no sound, just a sudden silence across Elthera's sky. Birds stopped flying, rivers stopped flowing. Even the clouds held still like painted glass. Everyone knew. Without needing to be told, the council had gathered for war or peace. Jake stood in the grand circle, the heart of Elthera's oldest city. Round him were thousands of Eltherans, each holding their breath. Above them floated the High Council, 12 powerful beings cloaked in white and gold, and in front of them, Commander Yavara, her armor shining, her face unreadable. Jake took a slow breath, stepped forward. His voice was calm, but the words echoed across the chamber like thunder. I am not here as a warrior, he said. I am not a prince, or a chosen one. I'm just a man who lost a father, found a girl in the forest, and learned that love can scare people more than war. The crowd stirred, some nodding, some frowning. Jake continued. You say Earth is a threat because it is wild, unpredictable, and emotional. But so is Elthera. We're not enemies, he said. We're reflections. He turned to Yavora, who had still not looked at him directly since he returned. For years you wore pain like armor, he said. You buried love under duty. But your daughter saw through it. She asked me to make you smile again, he said, his voice cracking, not to save the galaxy, but to save her mother. That moment, the wind stirred again. Yavara finally looked at him, and for the first time her eyes softened, not as a leader, but as a woman who had lost and waited too long. Her lips moved slightly, just enough to change everything. She smiled, and the crowd gasped. It wasn't a trick or a speech. It was real, raw, and rare, a smile that broke years of silence, melted cold politics, and lit up the sky itself. The crystal towers around the city shimmered, their cores pulsing with blue light. The roots of the floating islands vibrated, as if the planet itself felt it too. The council leader stood and raised a glowing staff. We have seen enough, he said. The alliance is confirmed. Cheers erupted through the city, loud and full of light. Elthera had chosen peace, not through weapons, but through one smile, born from pain, carried by hope, and delivered by a human. Later that night, Yavora walked beside Jake through the quiet gardens. Lyra ran ahead, laughing again. Her light restored, Yavora stopped, looking up at the stars. Your father once asked me what it meant to love a world, she said softly. I never answered him. Jake looked at her, and now she turned to him, that same smile returning. Now I know. It means choosing to feel again. They stood in silence, hand in hand. Not as queen and guest, not as soldier and stranger, but as two hearts, finally healing. Above them, a single comet crossed the sky white, silent and peaceful. Not a warning, but a beginning.